Welcome to the Cold Hearted Appraiser podcast. My name is Glen Kangas. I'm the Cold Hearted Appraiser, no matter what anybody tells you. We're going to talk a lot about estate and trust sales right now. And today our guest is Kiran Dillon. And Kieran's specialty is apartments, units, and things like that. And she's a dynamo. I've known her for a few years now, and I'm just excited to have Kieran on. So Kieran, brag about yourself and tell us why you're so fantastic.
Sure. Thank you, Glenn, for having me. I'm really excited to be, talking about this. So I am a commercial real estate broker. And like you mentioned, I specialize in multifamily properties or apartment buildings, as they're more commonly referred to. And within that umbrella, I have a growing practice on the trust and probate side. And before I started doing multifamily brokerage, I was a litigator. I left that just to have a better work-life balance. And once I went into the brokerage side of it, I realized because of that legal background, I was really uniquely positioned to work with this trust and probate field because I understand what the attorneys are doing and why they're doing it. And I can cater to them and help them, get to the finish line that they're trying to reach because I know why they're doing it. So that's kind of my background. I've been doing commercial real estate for almost a decade now, after I left the legal world.
Right. And then tell me more about your trust and estate experience. Just, what really got you into that besides just the knowing attorney lingo?
So originally, we were just doing regular standard multifamily transactions. But because of my background, I'm always running into attorneys and, I started networking more. And when I was networking more, I was exposed to more of these attorneys who are on the estate planning side, probate side. And it kind of just clicked of I could really help these attorneys. And I'm uniquely positioned because I do commercial real estate.
Right.
And there are not many people in the commercial real estate side who also specialize in trust and probate.
Right.
And so because of that background and because I started networking more and I was just coming across people in this field more, it just seemed like a natural way to grow my business, but also in an exciting way where you're constantly challenged and I get to use a little bit of my, legal background as well.
Great. Hey, before we get into some specific trust and estate stories, just something I've noticed, and I'm curious, you probably even have a better idea than I do. How many people are there out there that own apartment buildings that have a trust that are going to end up needing to sell their buildings either before they pass or the heirs are going to need to sell them? It seems like it's a much higher percentage than maybe in the past because of the silver tsunami and the baby boomers and all of that.
Yeah, I think you're right. Because we're dealing with commercial real estate, a lot of the properties are held like in an LLC, and sometimes there's a trust associated. But because of the way the market's been changing, a lot of the newer buyers are kind of younger and they're in groups. But that's like my regular side of business there, I'm saying. On the trust probate side, you're completely right. There are a lot of trust sales, lots of probate, lots of situations where the property's been in the family for decades and it is time to pass it on, but the new generation isn't wanting to step into those landlord shoes because it's not easy. So certainly, even over the past couple of years, I've seen a lot more apartment buildings referred to me that are in that situation.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just start with a story. Tell me a story of a trust and or probate sale and experience, good, bad, and ugly, and how did you get through it, and what can we learn from it?
Sure. So this was a trust sale, and I was brought in by a successor trustee who was a professional fiduciary. It was a 12-unit building in Glendale, and it needed to be sold. And so it brought me on, we listed it, and we get an offer, we open escrow, pull the title report. And lo and behold, there are 2 old deeds of trust recorded that no one has information on. And I see this a lot in my trust and probate cases, but specifically in this situation, the woman who had owned it before, she didn't have any kids or close family or anything like that. So there wasn't anybody that really had knowledge of the history of this property, right? And this professional fiduciary has stepped in, and all she knows is whatever, case files she has. And so nobody has any information about anything relating to these deeds of trust. So it was two different ones. One was for, I think, $160,000 from the 70s, and the other one was for $85,000 from like the early 80s. And there were three different parties involved that we would have to find and get them to sign off. So the first two were not easy, but I was able to find them on my own. And in both of those, in one of those situations, the dad was already older. The son had the power of attorney, so we were dealing with the son. And then the other one, the woman was still alive. And the third one, we could not find them. We had to actually hire a private investigator. They were like completely in a different state, found them. That situation also was where the original person named on the deed of trust was the dad, passed away, and it was the kid. So it's lots of parties, really old data. So imagine you're one of these people and an agent reaches out to you and says, hey, you might be owed $160,000 from this deed of trust, or however much from 40 plus years ago. You're obviously going to be a little surprised.
Right.
And you're going to want to take your time to see, wait a minute, did my parents have any paperwork that I could actually produce now to get this money? It could be a windfall. So it took some time to going back and forth with them. Eventually they realized we can't find anything, and they agreed to sign the reconveyance. The third one, the woman, she was a former realtor. And so she was like, I don't even remember if I got repaid on this, but I probably don't have the paperwork. And I was like, okay, that's fine. But would you be willing to then sign the reconveyance? And she was like, well, without compensation, and I was like, oh no, this is, she's looking for something here that she might not be entitled to. And so I told her, you're only going to get compensated if you can produce paperwork that shows that you're entitled to something. Otherwise you're not. And so she was like, let me look in store agency. And then it just turned into this, for a couple of weeks, I was calling her every day, and she was being evasive, and obviously because she didn't have the paperwork, but then also didn't want to sign off on it either. And she also was out of state. It's not like we could go to her, and we had to have a notary from somewhere local to her go to her house and say, like, please get in touch with us. Eventually she came around and signed off, but it was a process that took 5 to 6 weeks. Which even then, we're lucky that it only took that long. But that was probably one of the messiest title situations I've ever seen.
So just explain so everybody understands. When you say there's multiple deeds of trust, tell me what a deed of trust is, and why would somebody loan somebody money and not get it back and not have record of that? That doesn't seem logical to me.
And that's what I would think too. I think the issue here was, so the deed of trust is basically, it's like a loan that was taken with the property as collateral, and the beneficiaries, who were the people we were looking for, would be owed that money back. And what I think happened here is that those loans were probably paid off to that first generation, like the parents. But because the parents weren't, in one case, they weren't around anymore, and the second one didn't have capacity, now the kids are trying to figure it out. So even though we never solved whether they were paid off, I'm sure they were. Otherwise, somebody would have been getting payments still. But what happened was they were paid off, and nobody ever filed it with title. So it never got removed. And then that property was never sold. So nobody's going to be checking title in the interim, and it never was an issue until it was going to be sold.
I see. Okay. So before we get to the takeaway points at the end of the story, what's the takeaway for this? For someone who's had a property for a long time, so in this case it was a fiduciary that was a trustee. So what can we learn from this to try and prevent issues like this?
My biggest takeaway from this, one from the agent's point of view, is don't wait until you open escrow to pull title, right? And in this case, we were lucky because escrow just happened to be long. So the fact that it took us 5 to 6 weeks was of no consequence.
Right.
But it could easily completely derail your transaction if the buyer is ready to close and you can't clear title. So from the agent's point of view, it's, open a title or get the preliminary title report as soon as you're hired, which is what I do. Because sometimes stuff always, it comes up, especially in the trust and probate side. And then, like you mentioned, if you're a fiduciary or an attorney, and I don't know if this is feasible in every instance, but if you're taking over and you know that this property needs to be sold, maybe it's not going to be sold for a year, go ahead and reach out to your title rep and get that preliminary title report.
Right.
Because maybe at that point, a year ago, somebody was still alive who could have helped, or whatever it is. Or maybe this is something that's going to take 6 months to resolve.
Right.
You want to get the head start on it. So if you are able to, get title as early as possible.
Okay. Yeah, you answered the question that popped into my head. So just for fiduciaries in particular, again, they're always coming in blind.
Yeah.
And there's so many great fiduciaries out there and so much responsibility for them that I was trying to think of tips and tricks for there. So you're able to resolve that. And then any other issues with that transaction? A property that's been owned for a long time might have needed some work. Did they have the updated electrical panels for insurance? Did what?
This was before insurance started getting really picky on that stuff.
Oh, okay.
But definitely, you're absolutely right. There was a lot of deferred maintenance. It had been, which is typical of properties that have been owned for a long time.
Right.
I think this was also the same one where the owner was really close with her tenants, and she was gonna give some of the proceeds from the sale back to the tenants.
Oh, wow.
Which I had never seen before, but I thought that was sweet. It was an interesting one all around.
Clearly she had no heirs, because they would certainly fight that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Any other takeaways from that story before we go and try and pick up another story?
I think for that one, that's the big one, is just try to get title as early as possible. And I don't know what it is, if it's the fact that these are apartment buildings that are owned for a long time, or in the trust and probate side, that is where I always have the title issues.
Right.
I can't think of many instances where that has happened in the regular standard sale, because I think those properties are switching hands so often that title is kept up with. But in the trust and probate side, it probably happens in more than 50% of our transactions where there's an issue like this from a long time ago.
Okay. Yeah. What percentage of your work is probate and trust?
It's probably 30 to 40%, but it's growing. So I think it is, as I'm networking more and meeting more of the people in this field, it's naturally going to be growing.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think too, even as an appraiser, it's important not to be only in one field, right? You don't want 100% of your work from that, because you do get the benefit from being involved in other transactions to be up to date on the market in general, not just the probate and trust market.
Absolutely.
So I would never think that someone would be 100% or 90% or 80% or like that. You want to be doing other stuff on that front. Who are your typical clients that refer you the trust and probate stuff?
It's usually the successor trustee, the professional fiduciary, or the attorney that is involved in the probate or in administering the trust.
Right.
It's usually not, and I think this is just a function of it being, because I'm in commercial real estate and not single family.
Right.
It's usually not the family members themselves.
Yeah. Well, I think that's good though, because that's a complex arena.
Yeah.
And even actually for single family, they shouldn't do it, but even more so for commercial real estate.
Yeah.
You don't just, hire someone you just met, or you need somebody who's got a network of people and things like that.
Absolutely.
So, great. Let's talk about another story. Give me another story with a different issue, maybe not a title issue. And how did you get through it, and what takeaways can we have from that?
So the second one, this was also a trust administration, also referred by a professional fiduciary. And this was a 3-unit building in LA, and it was on a really steep hill, where the entrance to the top, this is how steep it was, right? It was like kind of on a triangle corner. The entrance to the top unit was from one street. The entrance to the bottom two was from a different street.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Okay.
So like that's how, just to give you a visualization. And so, have the property, it's listed, have offers, we accept an offer, and of course the buyer is going to do their due diligence, and they're doing their property inspection, and it turns out there are massive problems with the foundation, right? Which makes sense given how it was set
on
up.
a hillside, yeah.
There was like shifting settlement, signs of cracking, moving of interior walls, and the foundation wasn't the only issue. Again, oftentimes with these properties, there's going to be a host of problems.
Right.
The foundation was just the biggest issue. There were lots of other deferred maintenance types of, things going on. So that was a bit of a shocker. I think that was one of the biggest issues I've had come up during an inspection.
Right. And so, what's the remedy for that in that situation? Do you try and just sell it for less because a lot of them don't want to invest money in fixing that? Or do you attempt to fix it, or at least figure out what it would cost to fix it?
Yeah. So in this situation, it would have been too much for the fiduciary to take on that task of fixing it. And I feel like that generally is the case because the fiduciary doesn't have intimate knowledge of this property or their history, and their job is to administer the estate.
Right.
And so by potentially taking on fixing it, you might be increasing your liability because who knows what else is going to pop up. And here I think there just wouldn't have been enough funds to even try to do that. So yes, like for certain things, that's the first option, is you can try to fix it. The second option is so in this case, it was listed for $1,250,000, and the buyer after the inspection came back and wanted like $120,000 credit for the foundation and all of these things. So that's a pretty big chunk of change, right? And so the second option is you give them the credit or negotiate with them on the credit and still sell to that buyer. And then the third option would be you say, forget it, and you go back in the market to look for another buyer, right? But in this situation, what we did and what my recommendation was, let's stick with this buyer that we have because this is a major problem. If you do go back in the market, you now have knowledge of this issue and will have to disclose it, right, to protect yourself.
Right.
And the next person, who knows what they're going to ask for. And I think also in this situation, this buyer owned other property in the area. So that's already the ideal buyer.
Right.
In my world, is somebody owns property close by, they want to grow their portfolio, they have more of an incentive to stick it out than somebody else.
Right.
So in this case, what we did was negotiated back and forth, got the credit down to $90,000. That was the first obstacle, was getting on the same page with the buyer.
Mm-hmm.
But in this situation, unlike the first story, there were beneficiaries.
Right.
And even though the fiduciary is the main person who's making the decisions, they have an obligation to keep the beneficiaries, updated on what's happening.
Uh-huh.
And in certain cases, the beneficiaries can have, they have some power to express their concerns on the pricing. So one was getting on the same page with the buyer, like keeping the buyer interested, giving them credit. And then the second obstacle there was speaking with the beneficiaries and getting them on board with the need to do this credit reduction.
Yeah.
And again, it's like these beneficiaries had nothing to, it was a very removed relationship. They were just going to be getting this money out of nowhere, but now suddenly they have this expectation.
Right.
So it was, so then I had to meet with them, go over the report, go over the comps, do all of that. This is where my litigation background always comes in helpful, because it's like presenting a case.
Yes.
And so I was able to do that, show them why we needed to do it and why that was the best option. And
right.
then, they were fine and we were able to move forward with it. But yeah, so that's how that got resolved.
Wow. Yeah. Nothing like those repair needs that you weren't aware of to pop up. So what are a couple of takeaways from that experience as far as a fiduciary or heirs or anything? What could they do? I don't know that they could have avoided that.
Yeah.
But what could they have done to find it sooner? Is it better to have found it this way? I mean, it seems like a silly question, but in the in the inherited property world, you do have reduced risk in the sense that you're not expected to know everything about the property. So, do you go looking for stuff like this, or do you just wait until it shows up? What's the best thing in that? And what's our takeaway from here?
In my opinion, because I've been in this situation multiple times, you don't want to go looking for it. Just like you said, right? Most of the time the fiduciary has come in and they might only have a year or two, back time of since they've been involved with this estate. And so that's all that they can be deemed to have knowledge of.
Right.
And so you don't want to go, there's no reason to go do the property inspection when you're going to be selling it anyways, because the buyer is most likely going to do it. Right. So that said, you do always have to look at these properties with that in mind, knowing that if my list price is, like this one, 1.25, I need to know in the back of my head something like this could happen.
Right.
I need to have my expectations adjusted before we have a buyer, and so that when it does happen, you're not taken off guard. Because these buildings are old and that is going to happen.
Right.
So that's kind of the takeaways. Don't try to go do the inspections before yourself. Let them do it. They have the right and ability to do it. And then the second thing is, when you are in that situation and you're faced with the request for a credit, don't panic.
Right.
Don't jump ship.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen as much in the commercial space. I feel like I've seen it happen. I don't work in the residential real estate space, but I've heard of it happening more often there, where because somebody's asked for credit and they're like, forget it. I'm not even, how dare you?
Yeah.
That type of a thing, right? You get emotional about it. So if that happens and they ask for the credit, just look at it logically. Right. Go through the report. You can get second opinion estimates on, well, they're saying this is going to cost $50,000. My guy says it's $30,000.
Right.
You can do that and fight back with them on the inspection report. But that person has already invested so much into buying that property that it's most of the time better to go with them than to scratch and start over.
Right, because they're invested. They're going to want to finish the deal because they've invested in it.
Yeah.
So, a takeaway that I as someone on the other side of it, that I take from it is, if you're a fiduciary or if you're an heir inheriting a property that's older and hasn't been maintained for a while and has been owned for a very long time, don't be surprised about surprises.
Exactly.
Right? Don't be surprised when something's going to pop up. Don't just assume that you're not going to have issues.
Yep.
And like you said, the expertise is, don't go looking for trouble, but be aware that it might find you anyway. And you're not doing a good job by not looking for trouble.
Right. Because
of the laws in the state as far as disclosure. But just be aware that something might pop up, so don't count your chickens before they've hatched, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a great
I think, again, you meet heirs, you meet people that are inheriting homes, and they're inheriting pretty much free money.
Right.
And then they get upset when it's less free money than they thought.
Right.
And which is human nature, but
right.
it just, set your expectations and realize what can happen in a deal.
Yep.
And be grateful when you have someone who's got attorney experience on your side to help figure that out. Another quick thing, just, I'm sure you get a lot of properties that are rented way below market and have, again, a lot of potential repair needs. How does that affect value for you in those areas?
That's a great question. And people probably don't realize how much below market rents affect value. So when you're valuing a multifamily property, you're looking at the income and the sales comparables. You're looking at both. But it's the income that really drives the value. And so if your market rents are 50% below market, that is going to significantly lower the value of your property. That said, like 99% of properties, that we've done have been in some sort of situation where they're below market rent.
Right.
Because really the only ones that are at market rent are the ones where an investor bought it, put in the work to get it to market rent. Especially in the trust and probate world, they are going to be below market rent, and that really significantly impacts the value.
Right. So that should, again, set your expectations and realize, hey, that one that's sold for this much down the street, they had market rents.
Exactly.
And things like that. I just recently did a challenge of a probate referee where the probate referee had appraised an 8-unit building at $3.8 million, and they had another appraisal at $2.1 million, and that had been a year and a half ago, and so of course in the declining market it's now $2 million.
Yeah.
And that probate referee in that case was wrong. So,
right.
But man, their expectations, I'm sure, were in a challenging space. So.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, as you wrap up just discussion of the probate and trust in the multifamily and commercial market, any other takeaways from your experience in general, not these specific stories, but anything that people, whether they're heirs or fiduciaries or attorneys, should really pay attention to when there's commercial and apartments in their portfolio?
Kind of going off of what we were just talking about. If you have time before you need to sell your property, work on those rent increases. That will really help you. And sometimes I know a fiduciary, an attorney, or whoever, the successor trustee, is taking over, but they're not going to sell the property for a year or two. Don't just be passive about it. Try to raise those rents. And we have statewide rent control. A lot of cities have local rent control, so you are restricted by that. And you're not doing massive increases, right? But if you can show that I did an increase, the tenants are aware of it, they're still there, it kind of helps the new buyer that's coming in. It gives them comfort to know these tenants were given a rent increase a year ago. I am in a position to, do it again because they already know to expect that. And even a small amount of increase in annual income can really help the value of your property when you're selling it.
Right. Yeah, that's great information. Yeah, because the income is directly related to the value, when you do the cap rate. So the more income you have, the more it's going to be worth.
Absolutely.
Well, great tips, great probate and estate stuff. It's been such a pleasure to have you on, Kieran, and we look forward to talking to you again. This is Glen Kangas with the Cold Hearted Appraiser podcast, and we hope you take some great nuggets from our podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.